Miles, man. Today, this is an episode, but today is a very special episode, dude.
Yeah, who we got today, Ty?
Man, well, first of all, I'm a little nervous, all right? I don't get nervous talking to anybody. You know that, right? Like, I can talk in front of anybody. But one of the things that so many people do when they talk about their experience on social media, when they're selling classes or, when they're talking in front of people, is they always leave out the backstory. But that is so important to me about what makes me, like, why am I where I'm at today? And I am a big advocate having a mentor. Whether you have one in your life or whether you hire one, I think you need a mentor. And today, Miles, I'm bringing back in my mentor to sit down and talk with this dude.
Oh, yeah, that should be turned. Should be a good conversation.
Man, I think it's going to be a good conversation. He's probably one of the few people that can actually talk around me, or one of the few guys that can stand on stage and probably do a better job than me talking in front of like thousands of people, right? But here's the one thing that's so incredible about him. Nobody really knows his story, man, except for his family and friends. Like, he's not on social media. He's not out there like in the limelight. He's not in the photo op of newspapers and things like that. Like, sure, he's been out there. But if you like, do you remember that movie, or not a movie? It's a show, like The Men That Made America. You ever watch that?
I haven't watched it, no, but I'm a little familiar with it.
Oh my God, you need to go watch that shit, dude. But what happens is there's so many people in our world, in our universe, in our life that have a direct impact on what we do, right? Especially entrepreneurship. And some of the people that are the most successful, some of the people that have really carved the paths for guys like me are guys that most will never hear about, or women that most people will never even know their story. And I think while we're kind of still newer with this show, I wanted to make him one of the very first people I talked to because, man, like the amount of respect I have for him is incredible, man.
Yeah, it makes sense to bring your mentor on. The person that taught you what you know, helped you get to where you at.
And I didn't go to him to like be my mentor, right?
Yeah.
It just kind of like happened. I actually started working for him when I made a career change, and just slowly became my mentor. It wasn't like there was like any like official process. I just quickly became a sponge, man, and started learning everything from him. But 85% of what I have today, as far as my knowledge with entrepreneurship and things like that, are like a direct correlation of me just seeing him do something. And what's incredible about him is he has no formal education. He's just a common sense dude, worked at a golf course, was a trash man, worked as a police officer, started business, grinded, lived in Mexico, his family lived in Canada. Like, it's a really incredible story, but it's the epitome of like the American dream, where you don't have to go to college to get ahead. He's one of the wealthiest dudes in this area, right? I don't know. I mean, I might be up there with him or getting close, but he's one of the wealthiest dudes in this area, and most people have no idea what his story is. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So, Miles, do you have anybody in your life that you look to as a mentor, or you've had that have kind of like shaped the path that you've taken in your life?
When I first started in film, yeah, his name was shout out Jake Bonham. He pretty much taught me the game and brought me into, teaching and learning to do what I do. And then, meeting you has been, paramount in my life as right now, because I wouldn't be here without you. So,
oh, you're so sweet, Miles.
Shout out to Todd.
Like, you're such a little sweetheart. Isn't he cute, Lass? Like, he's so sweet.
The fuck.
I mean, if we weren't like the men that we are, I'd come give you a hug, buddy.
Yeah, we could do a handshake. It's cool.
You're just trying to make sure that you still have a paycheck every single week. But don't worry. We're doing big shit. We're doing big things. And we're going to keep going.
Job security.
Without any further ado, man, I'm going to bring John in here. I think you're going to enjoy this story. And I know the people that listen to us are going to enjoy this story. There's so many gold nuggets that he's going to bring. I guarantee you. Like, you're going to be like, man, like, that's just like, that dude can flow. Like, he's just smooth. He's a common sense dude, knows business. And it's going to be hard to chop this thing down to even get it into an episode that is consumable underneath of an hour, because he's just such a wealth of knowledge, dude. And when people hear him, they're going to be like, man, that's such a common sense thing to say. Why didn't I think about that? Like, that's just what I say all the time to him. But I'm excited. I'm a little nervous, man, talking to him, because, I'm gonna like make him talk about all the shit that we never really talked about, right?
Yeah.
Like, we just did things together, and now he's like super successful. I'm super successful, and we have a different type of conversation, a different level of conversation is what him and I have together now. And man, I'm pumped up. So let's get to it, man. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Let's go.
All right, let's go.
Why do they doubt the kid? I'm about to prove
From garbage man to police officer to incredible entrepreneur, we got John Pawelski here. John, thanks so much for stopping by today, man. It's an honor to have you in here.
Absolutely.
You know what this reminds me of? You ever watched that show, The Men That Made America?
Yes.
So if they had a show as like The Men That Made Dayton, Ohio, like I envision you being like the leading star of that show. What do you
One of the things in that show, though, their goals, they all had goals. If you remember, they had goals that they went after. And in that case, I think that part of it I am very familiar with and feel comfortable with. That analogy is that having goals has been really important in my entrepreneur life.
So you really have a crazy entrepreneur life, and we're going to get to all that. But one of the things that I see, like when I watch podcasts or I listen to people that are on social media, and the one thing is very true. They all talk about their Lamborghinis and their cars, and they show everybody on social media what they're doing, right? They always leave out the backstory. And for me, I try not to do that. So one of the things that I know is extremely important for my backstory is that you are sitting here, and part of my backstory and where I'm at today is a huge part to you. I mean, matter of fact, Miles is back here with all this crazy equipment, all this expensive equipment, and none of this shit, Miles, would you have if it wasn't for John. So you should say thank you, Miles.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate you, John.
But it's important for people to know that. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on here. But let's start at the beginning, man. You have really an incredible upbringing, right, with your parents and how they did. I mean, you didn't grow up with a silver spoon or some golden furniture in your thing. So, tell me, like, you guys grew up in Mexico. Like, what was that? What was your youth like before getting to the point now where you're, this crazy rich dude?
So my parents, when they got married, they became missionaries. They went to Cuba for a while, then they went to Canada. When I was born, they were living in Canada, so I was born in Buffalo, New York. When I was 3 years old, they decided to go to Mexico, not New Mexico, but the actual Mexico. It was 300 miles straight south of the border. It was a small town of about 1,200 people. There was no paved roads. There was no indoor plumbing, no running water. So, if you had to use the restroom, it was about 60 yards from the house to go use the restroom. But what it did, it created a very strong understanding of the difference between our wants list and our needs list. If you were to give somebody who grew up with a lot of luxuries, you would say their needs list has to have electricity, got to have running water, of course, indoor plumbing, right? All those are, of course, we need those things. And yet, having grown up without any of those things, you realize that isn't what makes the person. That's not what gives the drive. Those are simply wants and comforts that are great to have, don't get me wrong. But knowing that you can live without those things and survive and thrive and have a great time, my childhood was fantastic.
So how big of a part of that created the grind and the hungriness and the drive that you've had as an entrepreneur? I mean, do you think that's a huge part of why you do what you do and how you do it?
My dad taught me work ethic very, very early on. I asked for a bicycle and he said, no problem, go work for it. If you want a bigger bike, work harder. My uncle, who owned a farm, strengthened that process of working hard. But the difference between willing to work and being an entrepreneur, the thing that I found there is that in a job, and the day I got my permit when I was 15 and a half years old, and on that day I got it, and I got a job that very day, and I was super excited to join the workforce. And ever since that point, I believed in working hard. And in the job market, that generally rewards you for your hard work. But what I found out in entrepreneurship isn't that way. That formula doesn't work. Hard work does not equal success, right? I had an old dryer that would run for 2 hours and the clothes are still damp at the end of it. It worked hard, but I didn't say, well, you know what? It's making an effort. It's trying. I said, the results are negative. The results are zero. Throw it to the curb. It's useless. And that's business. Business is, you got to be willing to work hard. And a lot of times you will have to work hard, but hard work does not equal success. One of my mentors in entrepreneurship, teaching me to go from self-employed business and worker to actually being an entrepreneur, was on Western Manor Apartments. His name's Ken Rothschild, owned 2,200 units in Minnesota and had this portfolio here in Dayton. And he asked me to be the owner's agent for him down here. And so he was one year giving me the budget. And he said, now for heat, I've got $38,000 budgeted for heat. And I said, well, sir, that sounds great, but I don't control how much heat is used. I don't know how many days it's going to be cold. I don't know any of that piece. So 38,000 sounds good, but I really don't control that. He said, no, that's the budget. I need you to stick with it. And I said, well, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to go out in a parking lot when it's 10 degrees below zero and say, hey, turn your heat down? And the most serious I'd ever seen him, he looked at me and he said, John, if that's what it takes for you to stay in budget, that's exactly what I expect you to do. And see, that taught me that in business, it's result-oriented, not how much work you do, not how much effort you do. He said, if you stay home and sleep all day and get the job done, I'll still pay you. You work 80 hours a week and don't get the job done, you're out. And that was a real shift for me because I'd been such a hard worker all of my life and got rewarded on the job for being a hard worker. And all of a sudden, it's like, wait a minute, now I have to be able to put my brain, my problem solving, my working with people, managing people, leading people. Now all the skills have to come together in order to have successful entrepreneurship.
I mean, it's really incredible. And I think one of the things that you and I have in common is we didn't grow up in a family or a lifestyle where they taught us about entrepreneurship, right? Like your dad was a pastor, right? And your mom followed along, like a very traditional upbringing with them. I mean, not the fact that they moved to, Canada and Mexico, but everything about the way that they did, like your mom believed in serving the family and serving your father. And it was a very kind of religious, traditional type setting, right? Mine was not like that. My dad was very religious, but they also had W-2 jobs, right? And they believed what society told us, which is you got to go up and you got to maybe go to college, you got to get a job, and you got to have a W-2. And that's one of the hardest things for people to kind of overcome. But before we jump into entrepreneurship a lot, there's a couple things about you that some people might not know. And there's some things that I really admire about you. Number one, Miles, can you bring up that picture? I think it has a burrito on there. We're going to take a look at this because I don't think people know something about it, because you're in good shape. I mean, you're a little bit older than me, a few years, but that's there's one more. That's the steak. There, go back one. Look at that burrito, man. Lazarus, look at that burrito right there. Could you eat that in one sitting? So there's one thing that I learned. Miles, what about you? Could you snag that down?
That burrito? Nah, not at all. You ate that in one setting?
Yes, sir.
There's one thing I learned about the Pawelski men is, I don't know about Chris. I've never really ate a lot with Chris, but I know that John and his other son, John, these guys can eat. Like, they can eat. And they don't get chubby and fat. And, well, maybe John Jr. does a little bit, but he's back in shape now. But it's like they don't pick up any weight. They can eat burritos. They can go eat 5 pasta salads at Frickers with 4 orders of wings, and you guys can absolutely eat. And I don't think people know that about you.
My parents were fantastic about taking care of us. They made a budget stretch, but they didn't have much of a budget. And so they always made sure that we had food, but it wasn't to the level of eat whatever you want all the time. The meat platter went around once, and then the carbs platter went around more times, and then meal was over, and a lot of times you're still ready for the next thing. And I admire my parents for being able to stretch the budget the way they did. But I grew up, I was always hungry as a teenager. And so as one of the motivations for getting to the next level in business and in work and in entrepreneurship was to get away from the moderation that I was rightly taught. Nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah.
But when you take a beautiful ripe peach and you split it 6 ways so that everybody gets a taste of it, that's great, because we probably shouldn't have even afforded a peach. But when you get a sliver of a peach, or you get part of a rotisserie chicken that you're splitting with 6 people, it has a certain drive that makes you do that. And so I've always been an eater. When I have the opportunity, I've always enjoyed eating. I love everything about it.
All right, now how often do you have to lie to your wife about what you ate during the day?
It's getting more often because she's on it a little more, a little stricter down. I try to be honest with her. I try not to lie to her, but I try to avoid the subject when I can, and that way I don't need to exaggerate anything.
Yeah, I know I know the feeling. Lisa, like, how many Reese cups and Red Bulls do you have today?
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't remember.
Right.
Maybe I don't remember. But the biggest thing that I admired about you, ever since I've known you, and of course a lot of people know, your younger son, John, I call him Danny. A lot of people from his, younger years call him Danny. We lived together during college. We worked together. We were best of friends. And that's how we kind of came connected. But ever since I started hanging out with Danny, the things that I admired about him and you were your guys' family. You always had an incredible family. And you have 3 biological kids, Chris, Ashley, and Danny. Obviously, your wife, Kim. But how many adopted kids do you guys have?
So we have 6.
6 adopted, 3 biological, 9. Like, you guys always had this huge family. And I'm going to tell you a story. Maybe you don't remember this. And there's small things in our life, like as entrepreneurs, and we look back and we look at the things that like made us and like little tiny things. I think a lot of people would be surprised by the things that had like changes in our life and made us shift the way we thought about things. Before I ever worked for you, there was a time I was with Danny and we came out to your house. You guys were still living at your farmhouse, big, beautiful farmhouse, and you guys were having a bonfire. And I remember that night there was going to be like a Nerf gun fight. And you brought out, it seemed like 200 Nerf guns, like all of the crazy cool stuff that you could have as a kid. And everybody at that bonfire had their own Nerf gun, unlimited ammo, like whatever it was. And that seems very, very small right now that I say that. But when I look back, I remember sitting there that night and I thought, man, I want a house like this. I want a family like this. I want to be able to buy 15,000 Nerf guns if I want to buy 15,000 Nerf guns. And what a lot of people do in this world is they allow jealousy to come in their life. And when I saw things like that, because I grew up very poor, I never got jealous of those things with people, right? Like I wasn't jealous of Danny by having a great family. I wasn't jealous of you by being able to buy, it seems so small, but like whatever. I mean, there had to be 40, 50 Nerf guns there. I wanted to know, how do I get there? How do I do that? And those are the people that when you come across, you should figure that out and you should be a sponge to those people. And I know that seems small, but that was very important for me at that point. I didn't know that I'd end up working for you. I didn't know that you'd end up helping me in business, but it's small things like that have come along that have really shifted the way that I think about things. But your family has always been the one thing that I've admired, like more than anything. You guys just have always had an incredible family. I mean, it's not perfect, right? Like there's always things that happen in life and in relationships, but family is huge. Miles, pull up the picture of, there's some family photos in there. Like, let's look at this. Like, if this isn't like the Midwest statue of a perfect family, I really don't know what is, right? Like, it's just, I mean, gorgeous family, beautiful family, supportive wife, who also is an entrepreneur in her own right. What were you guys doing that night? Were you guys painting?
The Annie Sloan. So my wife has a store that she sells down in Waynesville, farmhouse style, that she sells family and farmhouse decor. And so Annie Sloan was one of the brands that you have to be franchised in order to be able to sell. So she wanted me to go with her to Indiana to this all-day class, learning to paint and learning all the specifics about the paint. So we did that together. It was a learning process. It wasn't necessarily my favorite thing, is learning about that, but it was wonderful spending the day together and seeing her excited about that process of things, being able to carry that brand and that kind of thing. So very enjoyable.
Man, I tell you that I think in entrepreneurship, one of the hardest things is balancing the grind, the work, the dedication with our families, and relationships are probably one of the toughest things that I think come along with the entrepreneurship journey in the world, right? Like, what do you think the hardest thing with kind of your journey and where you're at now, but when you look back over the last 20 or so years, like what do you think the hardest thing's been relationship wise, family wise, that was brought on by entrepreneurship?
So the society teaches us that if you work X amount of hours, or if you work in the evening or whatever, then what you're doing is you're automatically giving up the life-work balance, right? And somebody who takes a call on the weekend clearly doesn't care for their family. And so we're kind of taught that early on. And probably the hardest thing, I think, for in a relationship side of it was helping her to understand that when I spend those 4 hours on the weekend, that's so that we can then spend 8 hours during the week or a vacation that we wouldn't have been able to have otherwise. And it's not about the grind. The first business that I owned, she ran the office for me. She brought Danny in a pumpkin seat, when he was just a few months old. And and she would do all the payroll and the paperwork and all that because she did what she had to from a work standpoint. What I've tried to explain to her, that was when we started our business. I was a self-employed businessman at that point. Now, as an entrepreneur, you have to look at all the different opportunities that come your way, and some of them sound ridiculous to the outside part of it. I said, but don't look at the opportunities as the way they come in. Wait until you see what I do with it. And if it's successful and it benefits us as a relationship and it benefits our family wealth building as a family down the road, then great. Then give me some space on it. If it isn't, if it's something that totally is taking away from us, then certainly we'll have that conversation. And there's been many business opportunities that we've had to walk away from because they would have taken too much time. It would have been too much travel, too much away from the kids. But early on, even on the police department, she worked, right? It worked at Frisch's. She made $6 an hour. When I worked overtime, I made $34. So how much sense does it make for her to work 40-hour work week? It's not because she couldn't. It's not because she wasn't willing to, but it made much more sense for me to pick up 8 hours of overtime a week, and then she could stay home the entire time and run the schedule with the children. She was a fantastic, organized, follow the schedule, took them to their games, did the things that needed to be done. And I knew that if my schedule didn't allow me to, it was covered. But that was a communication piece. And I think that the thing that people lack is communication. They don't want to sit down and talk about those things, the benefits, the pros, the cons. And continued to be a work in progress.
You know, I think one of the things that it's not hard, right? Because Lisa's an incredible wife. She's an incredible mom. Same way, right? Like ultra organized. Like Pax comes home from school, she knows exactly what homework he has. She's already emailed his teacher 3 times. She has his tutor set up if he needs a tutor if he gets behind on work. And I'm like, I just can't keep track of all that. But I think one of the challenges for us has always been, right? Like if I'm posting something on social media or if I have to go to a networking event or whatever, she thinks that I enjoy all that, which some of it I do, right? Like I enjoy some of the pieces of it. But I think the hard thing for her in our relationship for a long time was always understanding how that got us to our end goal and the small things that we had to do, right? And one of the other incredible things about you is you're an amazing networker. You have a skill that is unlike most people have, right? Like you could walk into a room with 1,000 people, you could stand up on a stage, not have a topic, and I could say, John, go. And you could give me 45 minutes, an hour. You could just stand up there and talk, right? You're going to meet most of the people in the room. They're going to be drawn into you. Like that's just a quality that you have. And that is, in my opinion, one of the things that's allowed you to be such a successful entrepreneur. But sometimes the wife and the family, they don't understand, like those are the small things that you have to do, right? And let's stop real quick. You weren't always a police officer. Don't let everybody think that you always had a good job. Like you were a trash man, right? Like you rode on the back of a trash truck. And I think that's an even funnier story. And Miles, you need to hear this story, right? Did you want to be a police officer, John?
No, I never had any intentions of being. Worked for the city of Dayton. The day after I graduated high school, I started working at the golf course. Worked there for about 3 years, and they said, "Hey, we've got a situation because we need we need to balance the racial makeup of the trash and golf. There's not enough minorities at golf. There's not enough non-minorities at trash truck." And I said, "Well, I don't know what that means, but what do you want me to do, boss?" So he said, "Well, we want you to work at the trash department, waste collection, and we're going to switch places with somebody at the golf course." So okay, we did that for a while. The gentleman that switched places with me wanted nothing to do with the golf course. I wanted nothing to do really with the trash truck. So we continued to stay on those payrolls so that it looked good for the city's numbers, but we went back to both doing what we wanted to do. But I found myself...
Hold on. So you didn't even really work the trash truck?
I worked it for a week.
And then you guys switched and nobody...
And we switched back.
Did anybody know you guys switched back?
Yeah, our bosses did under the table, but the numbers had to be...
This sounds like some shit Miles and Lazarus would do. But how you got in the police department, that story actually sounds like some shit my guys would do right here. Like, it's so funny.
So working the golf course was fine, right? And and I was making $6.15 an hour at the time, and I came in one day. There was a plumber with the city of Dayton that was putting the sprinkler system in. So he asked for me specifically to help him with this. It was 34 degrees. There was a mist in the air. We're out there trying to put this plumbing stuff into the ground. We were freezing cold. Came in for break, and I remember looking up at the job postings that the city puts out, and it said police officer. And I'm reading through the qualifications, and I said, guess what? I said, I actually qualify for this. I said, oh, never mind. You got to take the test when I'm working, and there's no way that I'm going to call off work to go take a test, so I just can't do this. And my boss at the time said, no, you don't understand. The city says that if you're getting a promotion, if you're seeking a promotion through these tests, they will actually give you a half a day off work, go get cleaned up, and go take the test on the clock. And I said, well, in that case, I took about 14 tests over the next 3 months. Police officer was one that I happened to do well on, and placed high on that and was able to get into the first class. And while I was at the academy, 8 of those other 14 jobs called and said, it's tree trimmer, equipment operator. But I was taking every test that I qualified for. Said, why wouldn't I? They're going to pay me for half the day to take it. And I started in the academy, and I said, wait a minute, this is really cool because it allows me to use a lot of different skills. It's not just running. It's not just problem solving. It's not just listening. It's not just helping somebody out. It's not just accomplishing a goal. It's all those things all rolled into one. And I really enjoyed my career with the city of Dayton on the police department.
But it's more than that. Like, you had a lot of great success, right? And you go back to like your childhood living in Mexico, you still speak fluent Spanish.
I do.
And on the police department, you helped start like a Hispanic coalition in East Dayton, right? That brought the police department and the Hispanic population together, right? And that, like, you on the trash truck, at the golf course, did you ever, like, you didn't envision that was how your life was going to go, right?
No, but I avoided the Photoshop, and I think, let me explain what I mean by that. And not to step on toes or whatever, but politicians and people that want to get always in the limelight, always looking for the Photoshop, right? Whenever there's a camera around, they try to make it, how can I make this look good, and all that process. I tried to solve the problem as opposed to looking flashy while I was doing it. That Latino connection that you were talking about there, that came about because the city was getting sued by the ACLU, I believe it was suing them because over in Otterbein, there was a trailer court. They were kicking all these people out. They were all Latinos. They were kicking them out of the trailer court. And so they were being sued for discrimination. The city said, oh my goodness, what do? We can't even speak to them because they all speak Spanish. So I said, well, I'll go out there, went out there and talked to them. And they said, we wanted to pay the water bill. We went down and got set up with an account, had an interpreter. But then 2 months later, or 3 months later, we went down to pay it. And they're just shaking their heads because they don't understand us. We figure, well, they'll get with us when they want their money. Never heard anything. So then they're evicting them, of course, for not paying their water bill, right? Shutting their water off, and the landlord's got to evict them. So it was all based on they had the money to go pay the water bill, but nobody was at the other end to be able to receive it. So we talked to them, got their water bills all paid up, found that there was actually somebody on the floor of the water department that spoke Spanish well enough to be able to translate. So we put a little sign on the window that said, if you want somebody to translate for you, point to this sign. Fix the problem, no eviction, lawsuit dead. And I said, wow, there's a real need for us here in Dayton to have communication with people that don't speak English. So we started with about 17 committee members that way, and it lasted. It's still going on today. They still meet every single month. That's been 25 years that started. It's a 501c3, and it's just really communicating the businesses and powers that be with people that can't speak and trying to resolve those issues. So,
well, that's really incredible. Now, Miles, tell us the truth. How many applications and jobs would you have filled out for if you knew you got like half a day off and got paid for it?
I'd fill out a lot. I mean, all day. If I'm getting paid for it, yeah, for sure. Put a lot of applications in.
All right. So we never know how we're going to get to the end step. We don't know what that vision's going to look like sometimes. And it's just really the quirky things, man, that like make up our life, right? And you look back of all the small steps that we take to get places. And I don't know that all the small steps that I took, I had like an end goal or an end vision. Did I think 10 years ago I was going to be sitting here interviewing you in a studio in my building that I bought 3 years ago. No, right? And I think that's what's incredible about having an entrepreneurial spirit, an entrepreneurial mind. But as you're at the police department, you had a lot of success, right? Like you're like the traffic king, and I think they like gave you like a gold plated radar unit or a LiDAR unit or something because you wrote the most tickets or some shit. But at what point did you say, I'm not going to do this the rest of my life? I'm going to start a business. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. Like, when was that? Like, was there something specific that happened?
Yeah, so there was kind of a wake up call. There was it used to be on the police department, you would work these off duty jobs or whatever. You'd get close to your $600, where you then have to get reported on a 1099, so that you'd work for a little bit and then go on to the next job. And I had been offered a job to do that, and I worked it a little bit, and I got close to my time, and I went to the manager and I said, "Hey," I said, "I really love working at this location." It was a retirement home there on St. Paul. And I said, "Are you thinking about continuing this? Because if you are, I think I'm going to stick with you and keep working this as an off-duty job." And she goes, "No, I think we're going to cancel it because you guys keep switching people." I said, "Wait a minute. That's exactly what we're trying to do by letting the next person come on. But that's the exact thing that's going to get us fired, right?" So I said, "What if I'm the one in charge and I continue to be the person, the contact for you? I'll line up all the people to cover the shifts." She goes, "We'd love that." So I would do a weekly report for him and analyze everything that happened. And again, an ability to see it through the manager's eyes, right? Not seeing it how I want to see it, but I saw it through the manager's eyes. If you were a manager who knew nothing about police work, would you want to pay people at that time $16 an hour for hours and hours and hours of work when all your report said 8 o'clock, all secure, 9 o'clock, all secure, 10 o'clock, all secure? You think, why in the world do I have these people, right? And instead, what I would say is at 8 o'clock, as I'm doing my round through the parking lot, I observed a car with lights on with two people sitting in it. Upon approaching them, said they were here to visit somebody, but they didn't know who they were. I explained to them this was private property. They would have to leave. They left without further incident, right? That tells you a different story. Yes, all was secure. Nothing major happened, but it tells a different story. It tells me that as a manager, I was glad to have that security officer there. And so that continued to grow there. The place where I knew that it was really my calling was when a buddy of mine, Carl Chatfield, I worked with him on the police department, and he said, "You keep hiring people and paying them exactly what you're getting paid." I said, "Well, of course, I would never cheat my fellow officers, right?" He said, "But you're the one that went out and got the job. You're the one that has to hold the money until you get them. You're the one that has to pay the payroll piece. You're the one that has to manage everything. You should be keeping a couple dollars for yourself." And it took me a while to get to the point where I could conscientiously do that. But once I did, I found that people were very, very grateful to still have the job. I paid them quickly. I paid myself last. I paid them first. And they loved that. And I said, wow, now I'm making money while I sleep. This is the way it's done, because you can only work so many hours in a week, right? You might be able to work 80, 85 if you're really a hard worker. What if you were excellently skilled and you made 35, 40, maybe $50 an hour? Okay, 50 times 80 is $208,000 a year. That's your max. You've maxed yourself out.
Did you decide at that moment when you figured that out, like, man, I can do something bigger, I can do something greater? Or was it just, I can keep kind of doing this and I'm really good at this?
I stayed there for quite a while in my mindset. And then when Western Manor came along, there was a shooting incident with one of the staff members. So I was brought in as the personal protection. And we had a 6-unit. They asked me to become the owner's agent. So I was in charge of that. They had a 6-unit apartment building that burnt. And I had done some minor things with the owner, but he was very distraught because the insurance check that they were going to give him was way below all the estimates that he'd gotten to replace this building, to repair this building. And so I said to him, I said, "Hey, I'll do it for what the insurance check is." Never done it before. Had no idea really what I was doing, other than I knew people that had the answers. And he said, "Are you serious? That would be fantastic." And so I hooked up with HVAC people, the plumbers, the electricians, did the plumbing. I acted as my own general contractor and interviewed people and was able to get the building done. And I made $43,000 profit and had the owner, which I greatly admired and was my mentor, I saved him $85,000. That's when I said, okay, security business isn't going to be enough. I don't want to just be a business owner. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be able to take every opportunity that comes along and say, is this something that works for me? If it is, let's go. And so I went to him. He had 8 different empties at the time that were completely stripped down to the studs. And I said to him, I said, would you be willing to fix those up? He goes, no, we're not filled to capacity yet. I said, what if I go ahead and fix these apartments on my own dime? You don't pay anything on it. If we fill up every other apartment that we have, then when we go to put these 8 units in play, then you pay me what you would have paid the contractor to do it. And he said, well, I can't go wrong there. And so what it did was, now I'm coming from police background, right? Security, maybe a little bit of contracting, but now I'm in charge of the marketing. I'm in charge of bringing people into the place, because that's what I needed to reach the success that I needed. Didn't matter how hard I worked. It was, I needed to have success. And so I worked with a wonderful manager that we had there. And she said, okay, this is the support that I need, and here's how we can absolutely fill these up. I put the money into the apartments. We filled up the vacants. We filled up those. I made a considerable amount of money, because then I got paid contractor rates for them. Owners were super happy. Manager was happy because her vacancy was down to almost 0. And that's when I said, my model, my principle has to be, it's got to be, in order for me to get involved, it's got to be a win-win, right? So many times you get into a deal and you say, how can I win and make him lose? Or how can I beat her at this game? It doesn't have to be that way. It can be a win-win. You both walk away from the table going, that was a good thing for me, and it was a good thing for them. And so I've modeled that really in all the businesses that I've started, been involved in, partnershiped with, is this something that we can have a win-win scenario, or is it going to be at the extreme cost of the other person, in which case I avoid it and move on?
I think that's the thing that a lot of people miss, right? And I say it to young investors all the time, young entrepreneurs all the time, is that you can look at it as a business, or you can just really see it for what it is, right? And like, this is a problem-solving mindset that you have to have. And when you're good to people, when you do the right thing, and when you're always trying to have integrity first in every deal, whether it's real estate, whether it's business, whether it's negotiations, I really believe that comes around tenfold to you. And the shiesty ones out there, the shady guys that are out there, those are the ones you see getting jacked on federal charges, or going down because they stole investor money, or whatever it is. And I really believe in that. And I think for business, you hit it on the head. You're solving a problem. And at the end of the day, business, real estate, it's a people's game. And if you don't understand that, the world's going to be very tough, and you're going to have a very long road ahead of you to get to where you want to be at. All right. So you have at this time, you got the security business. You're still working in the police department. You're now going into some contracting with the apartment complex, but you're also doing like some property management. Like, you're kind of controlling everything, right? But what I'm interested in is, like, when did you decide, I can't keep working at the police department? Like, I got to get away from my W-2 job, because I can do so much more if I can dedicate my time to this entrepreneur thing.
Whatever it was that I was doing, I believed in putting myself into it and working hard. But when I realized that business was beginning to take some of that time away, and my focus was beginning to change, I felt like it was unfair at that point to continue to stay full-time on the police department if I wasn't going to be able to give them that full-time. And I remember I'd taken the test for the SWAT team, and I had been approved pending my physical. All I had to do was pass a physical, and I was good. And I was born club-footed, so my feet, I was in a wheelchair for the first 6 months of my 3rd grade year. I was in a wheelchair for half of my senior year. And so I had a lot of foot and ankle problems. And so running was really hard on me. I played baseball in high school. That wasn't good for me. And so I had a lot of feet problems. So I went to my doctor, and he said, there's no way in the world I'm going to sign this waiver. He said, you'll be a mess. I'm not going to do it. So I went to a specialist in Cincinnati, figuring they wouldn't know me. They took a bunch of x-rays and said, there's no way you're going to be able to do this. I'm not approving it. So I had to give that up. And I realized I'm going to have to go into a different line of work if I'm going to succeed. I can't stand out there with 42 pounds of equipment on and direct traffic for 4 hours on cement and expect my feet not to be able to take the toll. And so that's when I made the decision after 24 years with the city of Dayton. I said, I'm going to step down.
So for a long time, you're running Moonlight Security. It was going good for you. That's a local, security firm. You guys had all kinds of contracts, and from a wealth standpoint, you were doing well. Your family was doing well, but you're not the same guy today that you were when you started Moonlight Security. And what I mean by that is it's not like you don't have the same personality, you don't have the same integrity, you don't have the same beliefs. Like, that's not what I'm saying. But from a financial standpoint, from a wealth standpoint, especially, generational wealth, you're like 10 bars ahead of where you were back at that time. And I think that most entrepreneurs that want to grow and they want to succeed and they want to create wealth, which is, hopefully should be the goal of a lot of entrepreneurs, you go through different cycles in your business, right? And some people get stuck at certain ceilings and they can't get beyond that. And others find a way to kind of break through those ceilings, which is kind of where I came up with maxed out as like our tagline, right? It's like when you hit a ceiling, find a way to break through it to get to another level. And you've always done that. When you've plateaued somewhere in one of your businesses, you found another business, you found another opportunity, and you've poked through and been able to push through on another front. One of the things that drives me nuts with people is when I hear them tell me, man, I had a great opportunity, but I didn't know enough to take it. And I always tell people, stop that mindset. Like, if you see an opportunity, take that shit and become the expert later, like figure it out. Right. And I've done that consistently with my business, but I think that's another unique story about your entrepreneur journey is, now it might be your largest company is your addiction services, right? Like your addiction treatment services that you have, which is full circle recovery services. You never planned on opening addiction clinics or anything along those lines, but the way that you got there is pretty damn unique. And that came from the security world. But I think when I look back at that piece of it, you saw an opportunity and you said, I don't know a lot about this other than kind of what you learned from the security front and kind of knew, but you took it and you jumped out on a cliff and you put your fears in the back burner. But how did that happen to where you started the addiction service?
It was about 2016. I'd been asked by somebody that was currently running an addiction service, and I was doing security for them. They said, hey, I want to expand. Business, so why don't you come in, you do the business part. I'll handle everything clinic and billing from that standpoint. And so we did. We got tied up with one of the local mental health agencies that had been deceptive, to say the least, on how much in debt they were and that kind of thing. And so I began to do the business aspect of it. He was doing the clinical. Then his partner said, wait a minute, you can't do that. That's competing against us. And so there I was, not knowing the difference between, an LSW and an RN and an LPN. I didn't know any of that acronyms. I knew all the police acronyms, but I didn't know any of the clinical. But what I did know is that in 2015, the study came out saying that in the Montgomery County, which was the epicenter of the opiate addiction, you had a 3% chance of successfully completing a 90-day program. Now, can you imagine hiring an electrician for one of your apartment complexes? And he says, Todd, you have sure got the right man, my friend, because about 3% of the time I get the wires lined up right, right? You wouldn't be able to get him out of there quick enough.
We'd hire him every day. Like, that'd be the guy, like he's got the contract.
Yeah. So, and yet here we are accepting behavioral health success at a 3% level. We're putting millions and millions of dollars into treatment, and we're getting a 3% level of success. And I said, I'm no genius. I'm no expert in this field. But I had learned from my mentor, Mr. Rothschild, that running a business is 80% knowing how to run a business and 20% knowing the business itself. And any job that you went to, if you were able to convince your boss that you already knew 80% of that job, you'd be hired every time.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so any business, you throw me into any business, I already know 80% of what I need to know to run that business, right? And so that's when we began to see what things were missing. The housing component, to have an affiliate to be able to do some of the housing was a big issue. At that time, most behavioral healths are run by clinicians, and I don't mean anything. We have wonderful clinicians, but a lot of them don't have the business side of things. They feel like making money is a thing to be avoided or a shameful thing. And I've always said, as long as I'm making the money right, I never apologize for making money, because I don't have to. I didn't cut any corners to get there. I didn't do anything shystery to get there, and so I don't apologize for making money. And so we said, we can do this in such a way that we can get them what they need, do some extra services that they also need that nobody else is giving them. But because we're able to do it right and super efficiently, and so we created this whole system. I was on a motorcycle trip in 2016, went to California, rode 6,000 miles on the bike. So I had lots and lots of hours to think. And we just put this plan together where we were running schedules and efficiency and how do we do the wraparound services for our folks. It isn't just telling them, hey, man, stay off drugs. It's getting that piece, of course, but it's fixing credit scores, right? It's understanding that child support, if you are in the rears, when you come out and you get a full-time job making big money, guess what? They're going to take it all. 2/3 of it's going to be gone. And now, first thing you do, you go work for somebody under the table, which probably isn't going to take great care of you, because if somebody's paying regularly as their business, paying you under the table and avoiding taxes, they're not the most responsible person either. So you're right back into that same cycle. So getting your child support under control, getting court fines under control, understanding that job training is very little about filling out a McDonald's application. It's about finding your passion, your need for finances, and your skill set, and finding where they overlap and training to be able to grow that. So those are the things that we begin to put into place, and things that I had no idea about. I learned by observing, but I said, wait a minute, how can I expect a clinician or a chemical dependency counselor assistant to be able to take somebody that's going through treatment? How can I expect them to teach them financing and business if they don't get it themselves? If I'm living check to check, there's no way in heck I'm going to teach you budgeting, right? And so we said, we understand that. And so we begin to look and recruit financial people to be able to teach the financial part. We recruited people that are great in the community to do the community contact part. And as we started to do that, our business began to really succeed, and people begin to say, wow, that's the place to go. Because they're not trying to get you through a 90-day program. They're trying to get you into long-term, thriving recovery. And that became really our motto. And we said, we have one bed left. And as long as we keep saying that, it forces us to continue to grow, not through the business model, but because in order to keep saying that honestly, you have to keep growing. We have 42 people that work full-time for us that have graduated our program and now work full-time for us after they've gotten their time, because nobody sells full circle like the people that have had their lives changed by it. So we're so proud of that number that we're able to use so many of our people as well.
What would you say, maybe you don't know the number, but what would you say your guys' success rate is now after you've been doing this several years?
So it depends on how you do it, right? If you say of the people that walk in the door, how many of those graduate 90 days later, that's a different number than if you say, you come in, you're not a good fit for us, so we refer you to another location. That's still a success for us. We've placed you in a place that is able to do a better job for you. And so if that's the number that you use, we're in our 90s when it comes to the percentage of people. If you look at who just AMAs and just leaves the program, no help, no moving on, it's less than 10% of the people that come to our program and then just leave and walk back out onto the street.
It's incredible, isn't it? Compared to the national average and the local averages, and so often, right? Like, and here's where you guys are unique. You touched on it, but at one point I was running a security company for you, and I saw a lot of the addiction service places that we were handling. And it almost seemed like, you don't want to use the word like pill mill because it's not pills, necessarily. But when you look at like that big boom in Florida, when they were like, hey, let's open up a clinic, let's give out pills. And that lasted for a couple of years and people made millions and millions. You now kind of have that with some addiction services, right? It's like, let's get in, let's get it quick, let's get our Medicaid money or whatever it is and kind of get out. And you guys, and what I admire about you is you guys have at times at the detriment of your company, not in like a complete detriment, but you've taken hits on the chin so that you can provide extra services. You've spent the extra money when you didn't have to because you really believed in this program, right?
Absolutely. And so we start with what is it that the client needs. We listen to what the experts say. And then we look at our Medicaid sheet and see how much of that list overlaps with the billing potential. And of course, unapologetically, we bill what Medicaid allows us to properly bill. But then the other 4, 5, 6 things that aren't billable, we say, wait a minute, our experts said they still need that. So how do we figure out how to do that? Do we contact a church and they're able to do some of it? Do we do some of it ourselves and we just have to pay for it ourselves? And do we have some of our staff volunteer for some of those things? But we don't not do what is needed just because it isn't reimbursed and it isn't paid for, because we know that isn't what's going to succeed long-term and keep somebody in long-term recovery, is to just do the minimum of what you get paid to do over and over and over and over again.
All right. So you were a security company. You still have your security company that's operating here in Dayton. You've staffing services, the addiction treatment services. You were in real estate, and you're still. I don't think you see yourself as a real estate professional, but you probably have more properties than most real estate investors that are on social media selling educational courses, because it's a big part of what you guys do. But the point of that is you've had multiple companies. You still have multiple companies. You have several multi-million-dollar companies. Is it safe to say that like Full Circle has probably been your most successful company?
It has, and it's created our own gravity. And you've heard that term of basically what they're saying there is become big enough that you can have your own print shop, right? Your own landscape company. If we have 100 doors. So if we have 100 doors, who's mowing that grass? Who's doing the tree removal? Who's doing that part of it? And so we partnered up, started a company with a gentleman that was actually one of our graduates, and he was an extremely hard worker. We began to teach him business, how we could do things. He continued to grow, and our goal for him, somebody who came through the program, never thought that he was going to make $20 an hour in his life. Our goal for him is to reach the $100,000 a year mark. And this year, I am pulling myself out of the business, taking no profits moving forward, which is extremely foolish by what some people's marks are. But again, I have a guy who's very loyal, does a great deal for us, gives us a great price on what we need done. And we've taken somebody who didn't see themselves here, and now they're in a 6-figure income, owning their own business and moving forward. Is that worth me giving that up to make $30,000 or $40,000 extra? Absolutely not. I love the idea that he's now going to be able to move forward in his own business. And we have that with a staffing agency, with a transportation company. They're taking stress off of me. I love it. And it's for free, because at the end of the day, even though I'm not making money on their companies eventually, because I want to give it all back to them, I'm getting that service done for me at no cost to me. So anymore, I look at the supportive businesses that we have around what we do, and we say, how can we build this person up to be able to run this on their own? And with the real estate piece of it, we have about 120 doors altogether with my personal stuff and the process, but we don't stop there. And it wasn't to try to be real estate people, but we found a need for folks, people that have had domestic violence victims, people that have come out of jail and have evictions on their record, people that have a 451 credit score. They're great people, hard workers, but they're just never going to get around the student loans of $180,000, right? That you're just never going to overcome. And so you never have the option of being able to rent your own place. We're able to rent to them through a program called Overcomers that we created. And it's just, if you've had life setback, but you're a great, hardworking, responsible person now, we allow you to share a house with somebody and eventually your own house, while the investors that are doing that are making between 10 and 12% steady return on their money. We manage it for them, so it's kind of mailbox landlording. So it's a great win for the investors. It's a great win for the clients that are going through that. And it's a great win for us as a program, because even though we don't make lots and lots of money from that, our goal is to have 500 bedrooms in the state by the end of 2026 that we're helping people that would not have their own place otherwise.
Oh, well, I have a few vacancies if you need to fill some, so we can go at it. But here's what I hear from that, right? If I summarize what I hear is, very early on, you figured out that if you control everything, and that sounds like very negative when you say that, but if you kind of control everything, man, that has the ability to propel all of your other businesses, right? And once you've started one business, you can start another business. Once you start 2, you can start 10 more. And it's just a matter of like, what paperwork do we do? What accounts do we set up? Like, how do we function? And you said it earlier, like, 80% of it already. Just figure out the business piece. And I also admire that about you. Like, you always, with me, that's how I got started in real estate, right? Like, the first property that I bought was a 4-unit apartment complex, not a complex, but a 4-unit building for $20,000 or 21 or whatever it was. You gave me 12. I had the other 12 from my police retirement account. And so many things about our journey is, while I'm a few years behind you, is very, very similar, right? Like, start law enforcement, and then I kind of jump into real estate a little bit because you did. I end up, running your security company for you for a few years. But while I was there, I sucked up everything. I was a sponge. I watched everything you did with business. I listened when you didn't think I was listening. And I saw how you treated people, and all of those things like rounded me out to be the entrepreneur that I am now. And without that, I would have been many years ahead. Would I be successful now? I think so. Like, I think I would have. That's the drive that I have. But man, I got there a lot quicker because of you. And I also learned that from you is like, instead of having to have headaches with contractors, have headaches with, hiring people or firms, just create your own business and do it. And if you can help people along the way, right? And that's one of the things that gives us, and I know you feel the same way I do. And you were just talking to Becky outside before you came in, seeing them retire early from the police department, seeing them build their dream home in Florida a couple years before they thought they would. Her coming to me and saying, "Hey man, I need your advice. I'm getting ready to buy a birdcage business in Florida." And then a month later, like, "Hey, we got this opportunity to buy this blind business. It's $1 million and so many dollars." Like, hearing those conversations and knowing that, like, I pushed them to get there and that they've slowly saw kind of that entrepreneur way from before. When you're a police officer, it's like, the law, you got a badge, you arrest the bad guy. And like, that's it. You have a very black and white opinion of the world. Right. And seeing somebody have that success and have that money and not have to look at their bank account when they go to the grocery store, that gives you something that money can't buy you. And because of how I saw you do that, I try to take all the extra time in the world that I can to help people along the way. I always err on the side of caution to make sure they're doing okay. And most of that is because of you, right? And that's not often. What's kind of crazy about this whole thing is, when you watch social media, when you watch a lot of things that are out there and all the people that are pushing online educational courses, I know some of these guys and they haven't done much. They haven't done much. There's a guy right now selling millions of dollars worth of educational stuff that has bought literally 2 or 3 duplexes, flipped a couple houses, right? And he's teaching people about wealth. The people in our country that have really done it, that really understand how to be entrepreneurs, that have understood how to bootstrap and grind and get themselves to a place, are guys like you. And we don't hear enough of these stories. We don't see enough of the guys like you and the women like you that really know what they're doing. And when you look at kind of like my life, that's why I'm so much different than so many people in the real estate world, because I learned from a guy that built it from the ground up. And I say that to everybody. And they're like, "Well, why are you different than another guy online?" Well, because I learned from a different type of guy. And I didn't learn from an online guy. I learned how to bootstrap and grind. And I want you to know that I appreciate that. And I appreciate everything that you've done for me along the way. It's never lost on me. And you stood with me in one of the darkest times of my life. And I'll never forget that. So I hope that you don't either.
Well, it's very kind of you, Todd. I don't know that I deserve all of that. You had a lot of drive when you came in, and we did very well at the businesses because you were there. So you certainly contributed tremendous amount of that. But my first failed partnership taught me a lot about that kind of thing, right? And it was a putting up cameras and running wires and all that kind of thing. And so there was a lot of business. That wasn't the issue. But the guy that I partnered to do the work, what he did is he sold the sales pitch that was in the magazine, right? "Oh, do this camera. It'll pick it up at 1,000 feet," because that's what it said. What you realize early on is that that's a sales pitch. That's an image. That's something they're trying to portray. The truth is, it really doesn't do 1,000 feet. Realistically, for the average building, it's 860 feet, right? So if you say to somebody, it'll do 800 feet plus, and now you go out and it goes 860, they go, "Oh, it's just like John said." Actually, it does even a little better than what John said. But we're always running into trouble because we're telling them it reached 1,000, and it didn't. It reached 860. So we were always trying to go back and fix things and justify. And eventually that business went bankrupt. And I said, I'll never again give people the sales pitch. I'm not going to tell you what I dream of doing. I'm going to go do it. And then if you like the way it's done, then I'll tell you the realism, because I come from that experience. And so building the experience of me doing it, of me getting in that process, there's nothing that I ask any of my employees to do ever that I haven't done or that I'm willing to do. I would much rather mow the grass at our offices rather than sit at the boardroom a lot of times, right? But if I do that, I'm out and enjoying myself, mowing the grass, enjoying the weather, and my board is in there waiting for answers that they're not getting. And so that role is, you need to understand, like Bezos said, you've got to do what only you can do.
And what's crazy is, like, your most successful business at this point is the addiction services. My most successful business is the developmental disabilities. And I never thought I would be there, right? Just like you never had a vision that you were going to be running addiction services. But at the end of the day, what you learn when you kind of hit a different plateau than most people and have to find a way to break through it is that at some point you got to become the visionary, and you can't be the one running all your companies. And I tell people that all the time, is like, my job is to be the visionary of our companies. You know, when you're going to have different passive income streams, when you're going to have all the different diverse incomes that are coming in, and you have multiple companies, you have to be the visionary, and you have to hire incredible people, and you have to trust those people. And sometimes they're going to make mistakes. And as long as those mistakes aren't big enough that you can't overcome, that's okay. But once you become the visionary of your organization and allow your teams to run with it because you believe in yourself, that you've hired the right people, most of the time you've hired the right people, that's when things just really skyrocket. And I think that's what I've seen with yours. I was always fighting for your time when I was still running your company, but I never got upset about that because I saw you running multiple companies. I saw you doing different things. And that's where I kind of picked up was, you can't do everything as much as you want to. Like, I used to love going out demoing real estate. Now I'm like, man, it looks cool. Send me some pictures, like, not because I don't want to be there, but because we have to focus on the big stuff. We have to focus on the high level, and we have to allow our teams to really kind of rock with it. If you look at your journey as a whole, what do you think the most challenging thing that you've ever had to deal with as an entrepreneur is?
What is my biggest challenge? I think, honestly, if I'm just being 100% honest, is to know when to switch gears, right? I ran from poverty. I didn't have a goal in mind of money. I ran from poverty. I knew I did not want to decide on a Thursday night if I wanted to go out to eat or not, because money is what was keeping me from it. I didn't want to get a car that the salesman was trying to sell me and I could afford the payments. I knew that I didn't want to look at my children and my family and say, no, you can't do that wonderful memory experience that would create, because I just don't have the money for it. And so I was running from poverty, not towards anything else. But as we begin to be successful and you kind of look down and you see the lot of rungs that you've come up, one of the things that I continue to struggle with is, at what point do you say, okay, it's time to slow down? Is it time to give up? Is it time to, just ride comfortably into the sunset? And I continue to say, my numbers that I have to drive for the profitability begins to go down, right? I've been blessed way beyond what I deserve, for sure. And so now I say, now I want to create sustainable programs and businesses that help a lot of people, including the entrepreneur that's now going to make a ton of money. But I don't need to make $1 billion off the companies. I can set them up, and it allows me to give back. And so the challenge for me has been to know when to quit pushing, know when to quit driving, and to focus on the very best. I had a pastor that said to me, when you're young, you need to learn to say no to the bad stuff and yes to the good stuff. As you get older, if you've done things right, you learn to say no to the good stuff and yes to the very best. And I feel like I'm in that part of my life at this point where I can pick and choose, right? When you started off in business, you had to take whatever was going to make you some money, right? Now you're much more selective on where you go and where the advantage is. And my model has been follow what somebody said. I wish I knew who'd said it because I would have given them the credit, but they said, rich people yell, wealthy people whisper. And if I can create that comfortableness, the family wealth, and have my family go out and enjoy that and create the memories, that's where it's at. So now what I try to do is say, what's this memory good? What's the value of this memory? And then the price tag is just a price tag, right? Don't sell a great memory just to save a few bucks. Earn the bucks, enjoy the great memories. And I would never recommend somebody to cheap down when it comes to memories with their family.
Man, that's so powerful with entrepreneurship and everything. And I think that's, for me, one of the hardest things with business and entrepreneurship is I don't remember when I was okay doing it, but for me, it was understanding that I was in a different bracket. I was at a different place in my life. I was wealthy. That was the hardest thing for me to accept. And I think it was probably in the last couple of years where I said, okay, I'm good. But I remember what you said to me. And this is the last thing I'm going to say to you while we sit here, because this was probably one of the most powerful things for me. We grew up, Lisa and I grew up in Dayton. We grew up in Riverside. I mean, she grew up off Valley Street. I was in the trailer courts, and we lived in Riverside, where we both went to school. And I remember when I started, I think you probably saw that I was going to do better in business earlier than what I did. And I remember that you made a very pointed statement to me that said, at some point, you're going to grow out of Riverside. You're going to be that 1%. You're not going to be able to live there anymore because there's not going to be people around you that you can be, real friends with. And you're going to find that you get pushed out of that city. And I even went home and I told Lisa that, and I said, I got all kinds of friends here. But at some point, when you start having wealth, and it's not like we were flashy, right? But yeah, you have nice cars and you do good things, and you go to a dinner for a sports team and you can pick up a $3,000-$4,000 tab or whatever and not think twice about it. And you're not thinking in your mind, not you, but me, I wasn't thinking in my mind, people are seeing this and taking it a certain way. But you were right. At some point, we grew out of it and we became lonely within our city and didn't have people we could hang out with, and the hate and the jealousy and things like that. It was real. It was a real thing. And I went through a little bit of a depression about it for a bit. And 3 years ago, we moved out to Yellow Springs, and we have acreage and our dream home, and man, life is just incredible now. And it wasn't until we moved out there where it kind of clicked, and I'm like, man, John was right. We grew out. Now we grew out a little bit faster than what I thought, but we grew out of that city, and we had to go find our place. And I see that with you. You have an incredible home. You have property. You in your family just does anything in the world that you guys want to do. And it's all because of entrepreneurship. And hearing kind of where you started and where you're at now, garbage man to police officer, security company to addiction treatment to, several multi-million-dollar companies, you are the American dream. And that is probably the one thing that when I look at you, I see that. This is what people want to be. When people talk about wanting to start a business, this is the epitome of what you should do and the type of path and the type of grind that it takes to create wealth and real happiness in this world. Because money doesn't buy everything, but man, it buys a lot of stuff, and that stuff really helps bring joy to your family and bring happiness to your family, and it makes you feel good as a man, and that you can provide in a way that a lot of people can't. So I appreciate everything you've done for me. I want to say thanks for coming here and spending time. We've been here for quite a while, and I think we've touched on a lot of topics, and there's so many nuggets in here that people can listen to, and they can hear so many incredible, little pieces of a business journey and latch onto those. So thanks for spending your time. I know you got lots of stuff to do, but we certainly appreciate you coming in the studio today.
Absolutely. It's a real honor. And the last piece of advice I would leave for your listeners, if what motivates you and gets you up in the morning and gets you awake and ready to go for the day, if it's restoring old cars, and you find that you get around people and you start talking cars and you get all excited, you're just talking about this model, you did this. And after a while, people go, Todd, man, enough with the cars already. Your tendency is to say, ooh, I got to tone down my talking about cars, right? I would say, no, get a new group of friends. Because if your passion is cars, then get people around you that as soon as you walk in to meet with them for breakfast, you're all talking about cars. And guess what? Before long, you find yourself motivated to be around them. You encourage each other. You grow. Stay away from the haters. People don't want you to see you successful. People don't want to see you, whether it's driving something, whether it's helping the people you're helping, whether it's working with your family, whatever it is. If they're haters, go to a different table, right? And have that same contact and that same support with people that have your same passion. I have people that I walk in and almost immediately we start talking business, right? Because I enjoy that. I love it. And if they get to the point where they go, look, man, I'm tired of business, not a problem. It's been nice knowing you, right? Because I don't have time to waste being around people that don't appreciate what entrepreneurship has done for me. And that's okay. They don't need to. But I also don't have the time to spend on dealing with that and taking my valuable time and throwing valuable information out to people that just despise entrepreneurship or business. That's fine. Go do your job, do your thing, get wonderful, get your raise at the end of the year, and that's you. That's fantastic. You do you. But those of us that just have a passion, a love, a admiration for what entrepreneurship does in its process and its build, in its success, and what it's able to do for our families, our friends, and the community as a whole, that's the people I want to be around on a daily basis.
And I agree with you more than you know. So, all right, man, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks for coming out today, and we'll talk soon.
Hold up, why do they doubt the kid? I'm about to prove them all wrong again.